This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
Welcome to Rubaru. My name is Mayank Chaya. Our guest this morning is Denise Driehaus, who's the president of the board of Hamilton County Commissioners. Commissioner Driehaus, who is a lifelong resident of Hamilton County, is up for election and is working to retain her position against her Republican challenger, Matthew Paul O'Neill. In these times of raging pandemic, Commissioner Driehaus is at the forefront of an exacting task that county officials across America are confronting. Welcome to the show, Commissioner Driehaus.
Yes, thank you for having me. Delighted to be with you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. This might seem like a somewhat inane way to start a conversation, but for the benefit of our audience, why don't you tell us a bit about the responsibilities of your position as president of the county?
Yes, thank you. I have learned through my 3 years here that people really do not understand what the county does. And to be honest, when I first took the position back in 2017, I had a lot to learn myself. And so the county is a function of state government. We have a lot of mandated services that we provide, and those include running a jail, running the court system. The Jobs and Family Services is under us. We do quite a bit of economic development work in partnership with local jurisdictions, and we do zoning and permitting and those kinds of things. So it really does run the gamut. It is very important that the county services run efficiently and they are inclusive to all the people that live in the county.
And in terms of funding, how are you funded by the state government, I presume?
We are funded. We get a little bit from the state government. Primarily, we get money from the local sales tax and local property tax. And then we get some through fees, a little bit through a local government fund through the state. And then we have some other funds. We have 7 levies in the county. Those are they are put in front of the voters. And so voters determine whether or not they want to support the dollars for those levies. But a lot of those services are related to seniors. They're related to children in foster care. The disabled community is serviced by those dollars, and treatment and some of the other things that are people I think view as safety net services. A lot of those are supported through county levies. So we have a variety of funding sources.
Okay. I would come to the kind of services that you administer in a little bit, but since we are in the midst of an election season, I would like to start a bit on that, if you don't mind. From what I gather, reading from the local media, although, as I said, I live in Chicago, I'm these days here in Sharonville area. My sense is that there appears to be stronger enthusiasm for your party, Democratic Party, and your hope is to turn from purple to blue. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. Yes, and I am hopeful that the Democrats see a lot of victories both up and down the ballot. I think what we're going to see is that the enthusiasm for the top of the ticket for Joe Biden, especially in Hamilton County, is going to play out then through the rest of the down ballot. To give you a point of reference, when I was elected in 2016, or rather way back, I was a state representative before I was a county commissioner. And so I was elected in 2008 when Barack Obama was at the top of the ticket. And there was a lot of enthusiasm for that candidacy and for that race. And so many, many Democrats got elected that year because of the strength of the top of the ticket and the work that we were doing locally as well, in partnership, really. And so I feel like it's what we call the coattail effect, where we will have some coattails that play out in some of these local elections. And we've done some polling. It's been a while back now, but there is some strength to the Democratic ticket this year. And we are hopeful that we will retain some positions like my own, but also pick up some seats for Democrats in Hamilton County.
In terms of your own campaign, what do you think are your biggest challenges from the other side?
I think some of the uncertainty and some of the instability that has been created by COVID, I think creates a challenge for everyone. I think voting in particular has become something where we have to be very intentional about encouraging people to make a plan and vote early. Because I think especially the folks in our community who are elderly are especially concerned about going to the polls and about the increased exposure that would provide. And so many people now are voting early. They're either voting in person at the Board of Elections, which I just did on Friday, by the way, and it was very expeditious and well done. I must compliment them on getting that very well organized. Or they can fill out the absentee ballot and either drop it in the mail or drop it in a drop box. So I think there's some anxiety about just voting this year and about whether or not people will have access to the ballot. So that's kind of the number one thing. And then I think some of the vitriol that's playing out, especially at the national level, it does seep into local politics. We haven't seen that level of vitriol, but it's not good. It's not good for the democracy. It's not good when people feel turned off about the process because of some of the language being used and some of the interference that we hear about. So we need to get to Election Day and get this past us so that we can start to normalize a little bit and also focus on things that are really impacting this community related to COVID-19 in particular.
How do you think the vitriol that you mentioned in Washington and the rhetoric that goes with it will impact in terms of causing the shift here from, there's not shift, you already are in place, but I'm saying in terms of retaining your position, how do you think that might sway mood in your favor?
Well, I think sometimes when there is, a lot of fighting and controversy around elections, people get a little turned off by that. And so I think the concern is that some people will be so turned off they won't vote. Or also people don't understand the impact of voting, right? It's so important that everyone that can vote does vote because otherwise their voice isn't heard. And in Hamilton County, we have a great deal of diversity in this community, and it is so important that everyone contribute to this process so that their voices are heard and reflected in the elected leaders. And so on the Democratic side, you will find a lot of diversity. It's very intentional on our part. We want to make sure that not only do people feel accepted by this community, they feel welcome by this community, and they are represented on the ballot. And so again, this diversity is a representation of that. And then as those people get elected, they sit at the table and they have influence over the issues and how they play out for everybody in the county. So we've been very careful about this in the Democratic Party. And I do think that will play to our advantage this year. I think people appreciate it. They appreciate the intentional effort and they want to be part of the growth of Hamilton County. And so they see themselves on the ballot and that makes them more likely to go vote.
You've been quoted as saying in a couple of places I was listening to and reading that you're generally appreciative of what Governor Mike DeWine has done, but he's been getting a lot of pushback from within his own party. How do you think he's handling it now that there are clear signs that the pandemic may be raging again during winter times?
Yeah, I talked to him last Monday. A group of county commissioners got on a call with the governor, and we talked about these increases in our community of positive cases. We're now seeing an increase in hospitalizations, which is very concerning when you think about the capacity of hospitals. And then our death count is a lagging indicator, and we expect that will go up. So I don't envy the governor in having to try to message out to people, look, there are some things we can do that we know help tamp down the spread of the virus. Those things are washing your hands, staying distance from one another, and wearing a mask. And there is a belligerence from some people in this community about doing just these very basic things to not only keep ourselves safe, but to keep everybody else safe. And to me, that's the primary thing, right? I mean, I am I'm not old, I'm not young either, but I do feel as though if I were to get COVID-19, that I would weather that probably. But I have an 86-year-old mom. And I do not want my mom to get COVID-19. And so I am doing everything I can to protect her from being exposed to this virus. I'm displeased by people who don't share that conviction in keeping the most vulnerable among us not exposed to the vaccine and are not wearing masks. They're not staying away from one another. And it's very frustrating. And so our numbers are going up. And I think that we are likely to turn purple unless we change our behavior. We're going to go into this purple zone on the governor's map. And what the consequence of that is, we don't know, because it won't mean anything until the governor says it means something. So we are trying to work in partnership with the governor. He does not want to close down small businesses. He does not want to close down schools. None of us do. But there's a great deal of concern about this spike in not only positive cases, but also hospitalizations.
Why do you think wearing of masks has become so fraught with almost like political revolt?
Well, I think because some people have made it political. I think that and I also think there's mixed messaging. When we at the local level, with the public health officials and with data-driven behavior, say, you need to wear a mask, right? This is the one thing we have. It's a tool that we have that we know reduces the spread. Wear the mask, right? But then you see people at the national level, the president in particular, saying, no, you don't need to wear a mask. And, even when he gets home from the hospital and he's standing, he takes his mask off. I think the problem is that people see that behavior from leaders and assume that's acceptable behavior, when what we know is that behavior spreads the virus. And even in the White House, the virus is spreading. And so I think it's concerning. And so we have been trying desperately at the local level to say, look, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care. I want you to be safe, and I want you to help keep everybody else safe. And so please do what we know works, which is wear the mask. But they're hearing a different message from somewhere else. And, some are responding to this and some are responding to that.
I'm struck by, this may sound rather silly, but one often hears, it's almost like it's machismo. People think it's wimpish to wear a mask.
It's silly. That's a silly perspective. And I like to point out to people, even if you are, a young person or a healthy person or, don't have any underlying health conditions, you are impacting other people and other people's lives. And so as safe as I am, when you go out in public, I wear my mask. When I go grocery shopping, I wear my mask. I'm always washing my hands. This exposure is real. And if we've got people in our community who are very lackadaisical about some of these safety precautions, they're impacting even those of us that are being very careful. And so I think we must keep in mind that we've got folks in this community with underlying conditions, some of them obvious and some of them not, and we need to keep those people safe.
Talk to us a bit about, with the coming winter, what are your personal concerns and what are the concerns of the county? What are your biggest threats, you think?
Well, I stand with the health commissioner every week on Wednesday at my weekly briefing, and he has expressed a great deal of concern about people going indoors and gathering indoors, and instead of outside where the spread is less likely. And so we've already seen it in Hamilton County, and we're seeing it throughout the country where people are gathering indoors. And to be fair, I think some people, when they gather indoors with friends or extended family, people that what I call outside the bubble, right, outside their intimate group, they don't view that as an occasion to spread the virus when really it is, right? Because they're familiar with these people, they're friendly with these people, and so they let down their guard, they take the mask off, and they're in close proximity to one another. That is a way to spread the virus, and that is how it is spreading in Hamilton County. And you hear these stories, national stories about this, that these are smaller gatherings. It's not like a big, wedding or a big funeral or something like that. These are smaller gatherings of, 15 to 20 people. And so I think I've heard the health commissioner say, and I share the concern, that people are going to let down their guard. They're going to go indoors, and that will increase the spread as we move into the colder months.
With the passage of about 7 months after the first onset of the virus, I'm sure there has been a lot of learning, even at the county level, how to deal with this rather extraordinary situation. As you see a second wave sort of coming during winter, what kind of learning do you think you have, and how do you propose to deploy that?
Well, I think the learnings are the very simple things that we've been talking about. The other thing that we've learned from the hospital perspective is how to deal with people that have COVID-19. And so I do believe that the healthcare systems have gotten better at responding to what they now know about COVID, how to treat people with COVID, and how to make that stay in the hospital, hopefully a little bit shorter, and to try to save lives. But that said, this is a deadly virus. We all know that. And, in some cases, this is going to be fatal. And so I think we individually need to say to ourselves, we've got a responsibility, an individual responsibility to do our part, to do these very simple things. And I think what we know is masking is probably the best defense we have right now until we get a vaccine for the virus, which I don't know when that's going to roll out, but we are not going to see this go away until after that vaccine is widely distributed. People have taken it, and then people can get on with a more normal lifestyle. But my fear is that that's going to happen next year sometime, not this year sometime, especially because the widespread distribution is going to take some time. So we at the county are gearing up for that. We've purchased a warehouse. It has the capacity to refrigerate or freeze the vaccine at the temperatures necessary. So we're gearing up, and we will work in partnership with the health institutions to push that vaccine out when it comes. We're just not there yet.
Right. Hamilton County has received direct federal dollars because the population is 500,000 plus, as I understand it. I think you're talking about about $140 million or so?
Yeah, it's $142 million.
Okay. Now, how do you allocate these funds? I'm sure most of it would be spent by now, because I think your deadline is end of the year.
That's right. So we have a deadline of the end of the year to spend these dollars, and they must be spent in response to COVID-19. And so what we have done, and we've, of the 142 million, by the way, we've got about 150,000 left. So not very much left, which is the good news, right? Because the need is so great in our community. And so, initially we were rehousing the homeless population because they were in congregate settings. And so we were putting them in hotels, and now have started to retrofit the facilities so they can safely go back to them. We have done a small business assistance program. We did 2 rounds of that. I think the total was about $7.5 million to try to keep small businesses in business, right? To keep those doors open. We've done a rent and utility assistance program, again, about a $7.5 million effort with local partners in this community to make sure that people can stay in their homes. That, unfortunately, I think is going to be an ongoing need at the longer we go here and the longer people are unemployed. And then we've also purchased PPE to distribute to hospitals and nursing homes and schools. We have purchased, or rather are helping to employ contact tracers in this community. We're putting some towards local public safety, particularly at the county level. And then we took $25 million and pushed it down to all the jurisdictions in Hamilton County, because as you just said, Hamilton County, because we're so large, got a direct allocation. None of the 49 jurisdictions in the county got any of that. They got some from the state, but they didn't get a direct allocation like we did. So we took $25 million and pushed that down so that the first responders and the local communities have the capacity to do things that they know that's needed in their own communities. And some of that has been retrofitting restaurants so that they have outdoor dining, so that people can remain safe. So those are some examples of what those funds were used for, but we're really proud of the effort. It took a very large team here at the county to make that happen, but I'm very, very proud of the effort that we've put forth on that.
A couple of questions flow from what you just said. One is, you talked about rental and utilities relief for people, even housing relief, for instance. If there are people in our audience who might be looking for any of these reliefs, What's the easiest way to avail that?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we're working with local partners, particularly when it comes to the rent relief. And so your listeners would be familiar with the Free Store Food Bank, the Community Action Agency, and Talbert House. Those are our partners agencies in doing that. And so they have to be qualified to do it. Have to prove that they've had a reduction in income. And then the rent relief goes directly to the landlord. So it's a very efficient process. Or to get any of the things I just talked about, and there's nonprofit relief, there's arts community relief. We've kind of run the gamut. They can simply go to the county website. So that's, I'm going to pull it just to make sure I hate if I mess this up. It's Hamilton County, Ohio.org. HamiltonCountyOhio.org. So go to the website and you can see COVID relief on there. There's a button for it. You push on that and you can see the dashboard and you can see what's available, where the dollars have been. And these are taxpayer dollars, right? So you can see how the money has been spent. It's very transparent. But also if you need any help, or just call my office. All right. I'm happy to help.
Okay. The $142 million that you mentioned, was that incumbent on you distributing it to or passing some of it on to the other counties that did not meet the criterion of 500,000 population, or you just did it out of a sense of responsibility?
We were not obligated to do that. And many counties in Ohio did. In fact, most counties did not do that. But I will tell you that when you look at these local jurisdictions, they were hurting. And I'm on a call every week with local jurisdictions and leaders. And they were saying that they were seeing all these needs on the ground. And we said, well, we have to help. And so the state did provide some funding to them, but it was pretty late. And so we knew the need was great immediately. And so we pushed down $25 million.
I see. As a Democrat, how do you look at the Republican narrative, which for quite some time and continues still today to be dismissive about the intensity and the seriousness of the pandemic, right down from the incumbent in the White House? Yeah,
well, it's just a constant frustration because some people have told me they don't believe it's real. They don't believe COVID-19 is real, and they expect it to end the day after the election. I mean, what? To hear someone say that is so frustrating because then, of course, they're not wearing a mask because they don't think it's real. So the messaging coming out of the White House, and beyond that, it's very confusing because one day it's one thing and one day it's something else. I have always believed, and I continue to believe, that we need to listen to public health experts and let the data drive our decisions. And so Dr. Fauci, from the top all the way down to our local health commissioner, Greg Kesterman, should be driving the conversation and influencing our behaviors, not the politicians, not people that have very confusing messaging on this. That's not where we should be getting our information. But unfortunately, some of those folks have very big bullhorns and people are listening and putting other people in danger.
Talk to us a bit about your contact tracing campaign and how it's going, particularly in light of the surge with the onset of winter.
Yeah, so contact tracing is critically important to the effort to keep people safe. And so we have folks that if someone gets a positive result through testing, then they immediately get a call from a contact tracer. And then we try to figure out who they've been in contact with and what the situation was. Were they distance from that person? Were they wearing a mask? Was it a work setting? Because then people need to be notified as to whether or not they've been exposed. And then they go into a quarantine phase for 14 days to make sure that they then are not spreading COVID-19 unwittingly. Because remember, so many people, especially young people, are asymptomatic. And so it is really important that people understand what their exposure has been. So the contact tracing is critically important. We have ramped that up. In the very beginning of this, we at the county furloughed some of our employees, and I have 2 employees in my office. One of them got furloughed and she became a contact tracer. So we were literally part of this effort. But now the health commissioner has hired people in knowing that we're going to need them come winter. And so we are fully staffed by way of the contact tracers. I guess my message to the community would be, please answer the call. please pick up the phone and please respond to the advice that you're being given to keep yourself safe and to keep your family and your neighbors safe.
You already mentioned the fact that the federal dollars, 142 million again, most of it, almost all of it has been spent as required by the nature of the funding. With that gone and your sales tax having depleted so much, how does the county expect to raise or meet the shortfall?
Well, we did see a reduction in the beginning. Interestingly, sales tax has ticked up a little bit since the beginning of this pandemic because people must be shopping a lot online. I mean, or at Home Depot, perhaps, or maybe the grocery store. But it's interesting because I think we've seen a reduction in some sectors, the restaurant sector, obviously, but not in other sectors. And so we are flattening out a little bit. Now, I don't know what happens if we see a significant spike here, which is kind of where we are right now. And if things have to shut down again, then we're going to have some real trouble. And that's the governor's decision, to be clear. I don't have any jurisdiction over that. But we are very concerned because it's really hard to budget when you don't know what kind of revenue you've got coming in. And so we are very careful about that. We've made some very conservative estimates going into, because we're in the middle of the budget season right now. And we've asked all of our partners in all the different departments, some elected officials and some under the county board, to bear with us while we take a very conservative approach going into next year as to our revenue streams, to make sure that we don't get into some trouble and have to lay people off, because that's the last thing we want to do.
You've been a state representative, and now you're in a very different position. Would you care to talk about how the two differ?
Well, being a state rep, I was one of 99 in the legislature, and it was a team sport. You know, we functioned as a caucus on the Democratic or the Republican side. And there, from my perspective, there was a lot of bipartisan activity going on. I got all kinds of things done across the aisle and with my own colleagues. And you create laws and you respond to what you know is good for your own community. It's a much smaller space, though. Being a state rep, I represented about 110,000 people. There are over 800,000 people in the county. And so this is a little more challenging because the geography is so big and the number of people you represent is so large, and it's hard to get a beat on everything that's going on. And so that's why these calls with the local jurisdictions then become so important, because they are the conduit for information. You know, I know what's going on in Lincoln Heights because I hang out with the mayor of Lincoln Heights every now and again, right? And I took a tour with her a couple of weeks ago, responding to an issue, a gun range issue that's going on in that community. But you have to rely on partners in these local areas. That is a little bit different than the state rep, where I really got around and could visit all these communities all the time. It's a little more difficult at the county level, but it's a good challenge, and there are a lot of opportunities at the county level to partner with business, with local jurisdictions, and that is a unique space to be in. So while I think the county hasn't always operated in that space, I think there's just a lot of potential in Hamilton County to move forward. And we're doing that actually in the next budget, to try to be very inclusive about economic development, but kind of also, supercharge some of the development that will go on outside the city, inside the city, but also outside the city.
Until recently, say about 2016, the established wisdom was that the fractiousness in Washington does not trickle down at state or maybe county level. People work far more across the aisle than they do in Washington. But my sense, talking to a lot of people, has been that it's now really seeping into even at a much lower level. Is that your sense too?
Yeah, it is my sense. When I was in the legislature, there was a lot of bipartisan work being done, lots and lots. That's changed. The gerrymandering of these districts does not help, because what happens is you have districts that are drawn, first of all, to serve the majority, and at this moment in time, that's the Republican Party. And so you see, the state's about 50-50, Democrats and Republicans. You do not see that reflected in your government at the state level because there is such a heavy majority of Republican to Democrat. And so what happens is the districts are drawn in such a way that the real race becomes the primary instead of the general election. And so you've got Democrats on one side and Republicans on the other side fighting within their own parties to gain, election to that district. And then into the general election, it's so lopsided. I mean, it's either so Democrat or so Republican that the other party doesn't stand a chance. And so because of that, you get people that are more polarized on either side of the aisle, and they're not as likely to work together because there aren't as many moderate people coming to the legislature. That's a problem. And when people don't view it as their job to work across the aisle, they don't. And that's so the only way to correct that is to have districts that are more fairly drawn, that are competitive districts where people have to vie regarding their ideas and not so much their political party.
Where would you put yourself in terms of the political spectrum within the Democratic Party? I mean, there's a lot of talk about the extreme left, then you come towards the center, which is what Vice President Biden seems to represent. Then there's a whole lot of shades in between. On the extreme side, people throw names like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and that 3-4 people. And then it begins to become a little more moderate. Where do you, I know it's difficult to slot oneself, but where are your natural inclinations in terms of these kinds of classifications?
Well, I've been around for a while, and that's, I think, what informs me so much is that I am always trying to move the ball forward. And I used to be a small business owner, so I'm a very practical person. And so I try to work with everybody, whether they're, very far to the left on the Democratic side or very far to the right on the Republican side. It doesn't always work out, but I always have an open door. And I think the key to all of this, I do a lot of civility work. The key is to listen to other people, whether they agree with me or not. There is value in having those kinds of differences at the table. And so I tend to be a person that is willing to listen to everyone, create and make sure that they feel valued as part of the conversation, and then make up my mind as to where I lie on a certain issue. So whether that's a moderate position or I don't know. But I do think that as a practical person, I am always open to having those conversations. In some ways, it depends on the issue. As I said, I consider myself to be a very practical person. And so I bring that practicality, especially to budgets, and to some of the work that we do with the outlying jurisdictions, whether they're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't matter to me. I'm a solid Democrat. I've been a Democrat all my life. My dad used to be the co-chair of the Democratic Party. I am a Democrat, and I am proud to be a Democrat and represent my party and work for others. And I think, Democrats tend to be individuals who understand that there's a great deal of work to do to help those less fortunate or those that are challenged in our community. I mean, that's kind of our space. That's where we live. And I am proud to be a standard bearer for those kinds of ideologies.
Just a couple of more things. One is, since you mentioned that you are within the democratic space, you're issues driven. There is an issue which is emblematic of the so-called extreme left, which is the New Green Deal. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I believe that we do need to move forward on green infrastructure. We're already doing it at the county. We are not only making sure that these buildings, and they're old, by the way, are energy efficient. We are also looking for ways to move forward with things that are environmentally friendly and efficient and cost efficient. I mean, those two things to me go hand in hand. When I was in the legislature, there was a lot of conversation about where the jobs were. My view is that while we have a lot of coal manufacturing in this state, there is also an opportunity to move on wind. There's an opportunity to move forward on solar, geothermal, and those investments are job creating investments. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be recognizing the importance of an industry that's been in the state for a long time, but starting to phase into something that is more environmentally friendly to save the planet. And so I think you can do both of those at the same time, because it's not like we're going to go to solar or wind right away, right? So, but we need to move in that direction. We are missing opportunities if we stay stuck in the energy production that we've always had in the past.
As a woman in public life, I'm baffled forever. Why is it that America is struggling to have even the idea of a woman president?
Yeah, I know. Well, first
Explain
of all,
that to me. I just don't know how to wrap my head around that.
yeah, and I've tried really hard to encourage women to run for elected office, because you don't have a voice at the table unless you have a seat at the table. And that has played out over and over again, as you referenced. But it does start at the local level. And I think women, in my own experience, would indicate this, that we have to be asked many times to even think about running, because we're like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm not sure I bring the right skill set. And my message to women is, no matter what your skill set is, you are bringing value because of just who you are and your experience. Because I think when you don't have the experience, the diverse experiences that women often bring to the table, you do just miss on some things, right? You misunderstand things. And so I've established the Commission on Women and Girls in Hamilton County. So it's 20 women and 10 girls. And the whole idea is to promote that voice in this community, whether it's pay equity or period products in schools, or just having women appointed to boards of the county and other jurisdictions. But it is to promote the idea that women and girls are leaders in this community, and we need to embrace that and support one another in running for elected office. So in Hamilton County, I think what you're going to find is you've got more women running than ever in Hamilton County. And that's a good thing. We need a nice, diverse slate of individuals willing to serve.
And finally, what kind of contact have you had with the Indian American community in the area?
Actually, a lot of contact. And we have something that we established right when I got here. I talked a little bit about economic inclusion. So we are trying very hard to make sure that everyone has an opportunity, whether it's, employment or purchasing or contracting or construction. We are Hamilton County, and we are a diverse community, and we need to embrace that diversity. And so when I first got here, we established an economic inclusion advisory council and made sure that the Indian American community had a seat at that table by design. It's written into the resolution. And so it also talks about, the African American community, people with disabilities, but the Indian American community has a seat. And I think it's really important because there is so much potential, and these relationships must be established in order to realize the potential that exists in every community in Hamilton County. And so it is an effort to make sure that certain organizations have a seat at the table and are allowed to be part of this growth that I talk about.
Commissioner Driehaus, on that note, I want to thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to meet you and talk to you, and we will send you the link of the video soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And one other thing I neglected to mention is that there is a celebration every year of Indian culture. It's beautiful. It's just a beautiful celebration. And Hamilton County, of course, has always partnered in that celebration. So as I said, I celebrate you. We celebrate one another. So thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
No, and as a culture and as a civilization, India is an eternal state of celebration. You would discover when you go to India.
I would love to do that.
Well, you have a standing invitation.
Very good. Thank you.
Nice to talk to you, and all the